that's sort of where we are. Um, We're having continued review and discussion on the developments matrix. So I don't know, since the last meeting, if you have had a chance to look any more at the development standards matrix that we talked about last time. And if so, do you have any kind of off the top of your head comments? Okay. Yes.
Well, I mean, I've gone over it, you know, and I feel like I think that we're not focusing and narrowing things down as quickly as I would like to see them, you know, because we're getting broad. It's kind of like a broad area. It's almost like the landscape is so big that it's hard to deal with. So I would just like to suggest that we do try to narrow it down a little bit more. And so, I mean, I have some ideas about some of the areas that we've discussed, but probably not until we get to them. But that would be one idea that I have, is that if we're really going to try to be like prepared for a meeting with the city council on the 22nd, I think we better get things narrowed down a little bit, because if we could spend all day talking about watershed.
Right. I understand.
You know what I mean?
I think what we should do, several years ago, we started working on large-scale developments.
Yeah.
And we actually worked on landscaping and different things and how things should face and things like that. I think that's something we can start looking at, because it's already on the books.
Good.
And then go from there.
So are you referring to the projects over 30,000 square feet?
Yeah, I'm talking about, and you know, that basically gives us I mean, it's definitely wider, but I think that would give you something to look at without having Nora dig through a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And try to figure out what we're looking at. And because of the large-scale development, things that we've done in the past. So I say, start from there and go from there. Do we want to continue that, what's on the books, or do we not want to continue that, which is on the books? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What don't we want to do? What do we want to do? Basically, I think another thing to look at is look at it upside down or backwards. We're looking at something that is a huge, broad brush. What we need to do is narrow down what we don't want instead of what we do want.
Yeah, I agree.
Because generally speaking, do we want, like in the development, the large-scale development ordinance that we went through several years ago, we made a point of not having a ton of concrete and asphalt, and lots of shade, lots of trees, lots of things that would break up large pieces of property that are that require large parking lots, like 110-room Hyatt or a 96-room Homewood Suites, or whatever the case may be. And then, like I'd say, I don't want a big parking lot in front. I mean, we've already discussed this on the north side, you know, on the north commercial development. We don't want big parking lots in the front of the development and things like that. So what we want, but also what don't we want? That's something that, you know, as we look at our town and how our development has gone, I think what we want to do is, do we want to go down that avenue? Do we want another parking garage in the center of town? Do we want, you know, that kind of thing? Kind of look at things backwards and forwards, not just what we want, because a lot of that stuff has already been done. We've spent a lot of money, we've spent a lot of time. I think what we need to do is look at stuff that we have already looked at and then go from there.
I think that's a really good point. And what I used to develop the matrix was based on the stuff that Landmark prepared, which is actually pretty similar to this section of the code.
We're not getting any of that stuff currently, though. I mean, is the thing. Like, you still have, the Wingate, for example, is something, I think that's an example of what a lot of people have said they don't want to see. And that is over 30,000 square feet, and that had to comply with this chapter of the code, and yet it still ended up how it looks.
Which one's the Wingate?
The one by Geezer.
By Wyndham, south of town?
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that county?
No, that's city.
Yeah, that's in the city.
Yeah.
And I put this little comparison chart because I want to talk a little bit about scale. Because I think that's kind of a key. I mean, most of the rest of the stuff I can definitely take from our existing standards and we can build on it from there. Also, the SAR standards are good in many ways. So I don't want to reinvent the wheels when we know things are working. But if it's not working, you know,
Yeah.
what is it about the Wyndham that we don't like? And then, or the Wingate. But it's, what I'm trying to get a handle on in my head right now is sort of the scale issue. And obviously that's an issue.
Yeah.
At scale and design, people don't like the big boxes. People don't like, it seems to me, and what I have heard, people don't like the fact that you have these big corporations coming in and doing big things. And they do things of all sizes. So I put together this little chart and looked up some square footages and total numbers of rooms, just so you can get a sense for scale.
Yeah, this is helpful. Thank you.
And, you know, they're all, a lot of them are similar. I mean, it looks like around 100 rooms-ish, or around 75,000 square feet. That's kind of a standard. And then we have Worldmark, which is 270,000 square feet, and it's 152 units, but they're not just others. Wingate is 58,000 square feet and 120 rooms.
I know.
It's
You know what? Wingate is not in the city.
They came to us for approval on the,
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's for, I mean, it doesn't
Scale.
matter in that the development standards may not have applied, but I just included in this chart for size comparison.
Yeah. It was definitely, it was annexed at one point.
It was because it's annexed, that's what it is.
Okay.
It was annexed, just
Okay.
annexed in before we went and approved it, that's
Okay.
why.
Yeah, because
There's
all that
confusion.
land right there is like RR
Right,
slash.
right. And that's, we
W.
annexed that, and now I remember, yes, it is in the city. It's just, it was annexed not too long before we
Okay.
actually approved it, so yes.
So what is it about the Wingate?
It's the box. It's the big box. It's unbroken walls. It's
You can see it
facade.
from miles away.
You can see from miles away. That's another huge thing on
Because
that.
of color or?
Because
Well,
of where it's
It's a box.
located.
Its
on the
location.
outside.
yeah, its location is really more than anything, because I think something we have to take into consideration, the reason they build it that way is for energy. There's an energy issue involved. We do want them to preserve land, don't we?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think that we should be encouraging to go up as much as possible, because I think that if we're gonna have our way, I think we should be trying to not force, but maybe to encourage other things, other uses to happen on the property that they're not using.
Correct.
And that's been recommended here, and I applaud that. I think that we should be
Oh, it's,
not spread it out, but let them go up. It's too bad they're so close to the highway. That's an unusual thing, I think. You know, that's just the way that is. But what they are doing is they're building behind them. Aren't they building employee housing behind?
I don't know.
They applied for the HDH.
Okay, oh, did they?
It's kind of going.
Okay.
that's
Okay, but-
county, yeah, and that's that gentleman that's super upset.
And I understand the architectural side of it. I know that you want to have a lot of angles and all that, but we should be encouraging not to use water on the outside. I love trees, and I think that we should have some trees, but let's encourage just the trees, not something else. We live in the desert. And why are we going to try to go on this path of trying to catch water and store it and use it when we don't have any? It doesn't rain here.
Well, it does rain here.
Really? Well, it hasn't rained yet.
No, it has rained in quite a while.
Anyways, as Nora was asking, as I was answering, you asked what the main issue with it was, and focusing on design features, it really is the fact, what I've heard from almost actually everyone who's mentioned it is just the giant unbroken wall, square shape, just visually. It doesn't really matter that you can see it from everywhere, it's what you can see from everywhere. You know, it can go up that particular, I mean, and I think it's really interesting looking at the total for square footage and the number of rooms. It's got about the median square footage of all of these listed, but it has the most rooms. So clearly that shape allows them to pack as many rooms in as possible and make as much money on it as possible.
Exactly.
So I think we can anticipate that that will be a design for a lot more hotels in the future, just financially, unless there are some sort of code restrictions to prevent that.
So when we talk about scale, there are a couple of things to take into consideration with what we are dealing with. For example, we're dealing with some pretty big parcels on the north end of town that are undevelopable, or undeveloped, and certainly developable, undeveloped. And do we want to consider a maximum square footage for a project itself, or do we want to look at a maximum square footage for each building within a project? In other words, some of these big parcels, do we want to allow looking at a project like Worldmark that's really large and spread out, or the Hoodoo's on 7 acres. And so do we want to allow that kind of large project that's that big, that could potentially encompass one of those whole undeveloped parcels out there? Or do we want to have a maximum on the size of the project itself, as well as on individual building size?
Actually, I like the latter, basically because there is a big piece of property there that is not going to be developed. Where the old water park is, she's not gonna develop that. That's just gonna stay
Yeah.
like it is. So,
That's on
I
the east,
think-
that's on the east side, right?
Yes,
Okay.
Is there
So-
a conservation easement on it, or?
probably.
probably.
I feel like I'm really
So
loud.
what I'm looking at would be something that the development has to be smaller development. And I really don't care about developers at this point. So for me to say, you can't have another 270,000 square foot development on that piece of property, it is too big. I don't care if it's up in the, I don't care if it's 15 stories. It's not appropriate for that area because of the character of that area.
So that's the reasoning, is the character of the area. I feel like if we're saying something like that, it needs to be for a really
It's a character.
concrete reason and
I
have
think-
really objective standards.
I think the character of the area is already large enough as it is. You've got cliffs on both sides, or at least on that side. Why do you want to overwhelm that cliff with a large building?
Yeah, so you're talking about the east side of the highway then?
Talking about just the east side.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
not even talking about the west side, because
I understand the east side. I think the west,
So you're maybe proposing like breaking it into two different, like
I-
Brian talked about in a previous meeting, where east side maybe not as tall allowed, and west side,
yeah, because they're in a hole.
you do allow 3 stories.
Because you're literally in a hole.
I think that seems like a good idea.
I think that seems valid. And then as far as overall square footage scale, if we are gonna limit it, and I would really love to get a little bit more direction from city council about this before we start recommending a few things, just because I don't know if this is something that really matters that much to them or matters that much to the community. But if it does, if there could be some sort of, exponential curve where the number of rooms or the number of square footage can go up, the more you have other uses of the property, that would make sense to me. Where it can be a big giant development if it's more of like a little city kind
Yeah.
of thing with a lot more going on.
Yeah.
Because we do have limited land and we don't want to sprawl any more than we have to. And Brian's right, going up makes more sense environmentally and economically in certain instances. So I would hate to encourage, just set arbitrary limits on size, but I do think it is a good incentive where, you know, you couldn't get something like the Wingate with that many rooms on that square footage unless it had ground floor retail, service providers, office space for rent, things like that. That seems to, like, any way we can mesh those two so they both increase together, I think that makes the most sense.
That actually follows,
Yeah.
you know, that follows the general plan.
Yeah.
So for that'd be much better.
But Nora, would it be too much to ask that in part of that, of something else to build on that property besides motel, since we're lacking in rentals, is there a way that we can incentivize, what's that word? Incentivize the developer, that if they would put something in there that would be a locally contribution to our housing, for instance, I don't know, apartment complex, I guess, that we would bend over backwards every way we could to see that happen.
Or that they get more density maybe with their
Yes,
hotel.
more density. We could even offer water hookups, sewer hookups for no cost, you know, and that the rental on it would have to be in relationship to our medium income or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, local
Somehow.
deed restricted.
Yeah, and they could make money on it, but we would just be throwing that in there as something that they could do. Because, you know, most of the property on the east side is not going to be near as large as that on the west side. On the west side, I think we could, gee whiz, it'd be nice if we could have a 50-unit rental, you
Yeah.
know, a couple of those. Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, and I was thinking along those lines too. Although the
about that.
the workforce housing requirement would apply to any new development, so they already have to pay in.
Well, I understand that, but we could do that in lieu. We could do that in lieu as well. You know what I mean? We could say, hey, if you can provide this, we will let you skate on all these other items.
Oh, you could add it to the existing workforce housing ordinance where for choosing either the land exchange option or the providing housing option, you get to, again, I keep coming back to that, like, pick three out of this list idea. I don't know why, that just seems, you know, if we have things that all things considered equal or things that they would have to do, they have to meet at least 5 of a list of 15, and then they could, you know, meet 3 of the list of 15 or whatever if they chose one of the options that wasn't just the fee in lieu, ones that are actively providing housing a lot quicker.
I don't see many rentals going up. Is there?
How is that different, though? I was just working what you said into our
Oh,
existing.
no, I'm with you.
Oh,
What you
yeah.
said, I'm totally for.
Okay, cool.
I'm just saying that, to back that up, I'm saying I just don't see our housing market improving right now.
Yeah, the fee in lieu is too good an option to take at the
Well,
end
we
of the
just,
day.
that huge development over on Mill Creek. That's gonna be a lot of inventory.
Oh, well, that's true, but I'm not sure if it's gonna be too affordable.
There's a lot in the county.
I mean, the size of the lots to me is, I mean, they're not gonna be, it's not gonna be high end or
Yeah,
medium.
that's true.
As across the street, and those lots market rate were 140,000, and community rebuilds in USDA won't build a house and it costs more than like 120 max.
Really, on the MLS, I think they were selling at like 90 to 100.
Really?
Uh-huh. I'll have to look though to refresh my memory. They were right around,
That's like the sweet spot we're going for.
yeah.
Is like 100,000.
They're not deed restricted, but it's inventory and they're very small.
Yeah.
So, but, back to what you were saying, Nora, of the 2 ideas, I like the idea of breaking it into smaller buildings and requiring some on-site services like cafe, restaurant, maybe some kind of general store, just to encourage not as much mass traffic going back and forth if they need, say, a bottle of Advil or coffee in the morning or breakfast to kind of help, because that just on the northern end of town, more specifically on these big parcels, to encourage people to maybe stay on site if there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of rooms.
Right.
If it's a large development, maybe say total gross square footage exceeds, I don't know, one of these large numbers. I'm not really familiar with scale as far as
I want to bring in a slightly different perspective,
Maybe
looking at how big and how many units we should have. And just, the first thing I think we should start with is just applying the water study and say, here's our pie of usable water. And we know that hotels use X amount, which is like a very big amount of the water. And we should say this is, in the next 50 years, our acceptable dedication of water consumption from this slice of pie that can go to hotels using X amount of water, and then go from there with that piece of the pie and water that we're willing to dedicate to tourism and hotels, and take that and let that shape the development and the size and the scale of the developments.
Could we use that, I know you had as an idea, is there an interest in metering new projects? So a maximum number of rooms or projects per year?
Yeah.
And I think tying water to that might make sense, where we actually meter water for hotels. Say, there's not a max number of rooms, but there's a max number of like outflow from our aquifer that hotels can hook up to per calendar year, per whatever period. If that would be something that's feasible, I think that would be a very logical.
That's basic.
Yeah, like a super logical
We
tie-in.
have to do another matrix of
Yeah.
water availability
Yeah.
I agree.
based on the state's.
Nor is there an issue at all? Has there ever been any kind of an issue with that? You know, the peak season?
I don't know, I mean, I'll have to figure out, I'll have to ask Chuck and Public Works how we would, if we have a measurement, if we know how much water the hotels use versus other things, and if we can set some
Oh,
kind of
I'm
a.
sure they
yeah, they
know.
meter all of it.
I'm sure they
know.
There's been a
I don't know.
study
And then
that's
if we
like a
can,
very large portion
Oh,
of the
yeah.
water.
That'd be interesting to know, though.
we could base, you know, the water consumption maximum could be one of the performance standards that drives the size and scale. That would be obviously a policy decision. The council would have to make a decision as to how much is acceptable in their eyes to dedicate to
Yeah.
that piece of our water that goes to overnight. But that's not
Yeah.
possible.
I think one of the, go ahead.
Oh, so I was gonna say, I would love to see if there's a way we could get that as like a pie chart. Just something really simple to see, here's what it was in 2018, or something like that. And then it'd be really easy to see kind of what that is, if the current level is acceptable to everybody looking, which likely it won't be, and then if there's a way to
I mean,
scale that
even-
pie
You
back.
can't go on without that one statistic.
Yeah.
For large
But there's-
projects.
But there hasn't been any
I feel like
issue.
we can't really go on with planning the scale of developments without the stats of how much water we have for the developments.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been an issue, right? I mean, what I'm saying is, we're talking about something we know so little about
No, they
because there
actually
hasn't
just-
been.
They actually just did a new water study, just came out.
Okay.
It's pretty specific, we
Well,
know how much water.
I haven't read anything that said that we were having any problems having water, but
I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I can tell you from factual standpoint, on the weekends, I lose all my irrigation water. I don't have
that's
it.
that's irrigation water.
But still, somebody's pumping water out of the creek.
I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and
No,
argue
no,
about it.
I don't wanna argue about it,
Totally
but-
legit.
Like,
It's
this is how
totally
much
legit.
we have.
Because I'm for water conservation,
On
totally.
the recharge, not the actual aquifer,
Yeah.
right? That's what they're studying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally
that what
for
you're referring
conservation
to?
on water. I'm all about that, especially the irrigation side of it. And our motels are already meeting all the state codes, which are very restricted on flushing and that type of thing. So we can't change that. Okay, what we can change, however, is landscaping. We can change that I would like to encourage that we don't have so much blacktop, that we do have a water saturation area where people can park at the motels. Why aren't we? Why do we have to run it into our flood system, which is totally upside down right now in our city? I mean, we've got our infrastructure that's just, if we're gonna need money or help from these motels, it's gonna be on our infrastructure, because we're upside down. If you've been reading the paper or right? Right, there's no money to even address that.
And it's around town, definitely.
Yeah, I think, and we talked about that at last meeting. I think everyone was in agreement about, having overflow parking or large vehicle parking be gravel or be non-asphalt. That makes a lot of sense, and I
Yeah.
don't think there's any,
Porous pavement is what we
Yeah.
refer to
Right,
it as.
right.
or anything, I don't think there was any consternation from anyone about, landscaping requirements and, low water requirements. But this is just talking about using, because the community at large has expressed such, I think, agreement that water needs to be something that we're looking at when it comes to allowing new hotel developments. It seems that if we are metering new projects every year, that linking it to something to do with water makes a lot of sense, and I think would make a lot of sense to the community and be pretty defensible when it came time to talk to the state legislature too. It would be directly tied to that, say, we're not restricting, but we do have a cap on how many new overnight accommodation developments we can have every year linking up to our water system, and here's what it is. And they met it on July 12th this last year, and that's when we said you have to wait until January to put in a new application or something like that.
I think that's the only thing that's defensible, which is excellent. It's an excellent.
Yeah, it's hard, that's hard to argue
That's
with.
an excellent point.
And that's kind of what I've been trying to think about through this whole process is, okay, what are rules and regulations and requirements that are directly linked to what it is we're trying to do or solve? Because those are going to be the ones that we're not going to get as much pushback on, that I think have a chance of lasting a lot longer if we get some squirrely legislators trying to come in and schmoosh us next year.
Maybe having Chuck and, what's the other gentleman's name?
Tracy? No, not Tracy.
The engineer.
Mark, our engineer, or the
Chuck?
No, there's Chuck, and then there's another guy up there.
Yeah, there is.
Eric.
Yeah.
Maybe they could just meet us at our next meeting and talk about all of those statistics. We could go over them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there have been a couple studies done, and there's been a lot of back and forth about what's right, what's wrong.
I'm sure.
And there's still sort of, there are different point of views as to how to interpret the information. But that's to be expected, and that will shape through.
Yeah.
But for our meeting coming up on the 22nd, can we say there's 4 things that we need to address? Are there?
Well,
What's the
here's one
priority?
thing that I wanted to add on that you mentioned is like, what are our most needed public works or public, what's our most lacking area of our city? And where do we need to raise funds? Where would help the city the most? Is it roads? Is it?
It's infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
What kind of infrastructure?
It's
projects?
both the
Sewer lines,
system
water lines.
and the
roads.
water,
Water, roads.
the flooding. What do you call that? Storm
Storm
drain.
drainage.
It's a storm drain system that is so antiquated. It's failed.
And then like, what are the?
And the streets.
What's the capacity for a new hotel development to sell that in any way?
Well, I don't know, because when you build something on the north end of town, Nora, right? Can we attach them to start building on Main Street to help us build that in? I
That's
don't
what
know.
impact fees are for.
Yeah, they pay
Impact
impact fees, and then we get
Yeah.
the sales tax revenue from the development,
So
so
I
it
guess it's covered.
increases our
Actively
budget.
trying to change what the sales tax revenue percentage is that can go to that for Moab, as we're always trying to do, but it seems closer than it's been in a while, so.
But is that one of the items, or is that,
That's
what can we
something
be
we-
discussing?
Wow.
Are we going all over the board? I'd just like to know, what things does the city council want us to do? Is there something specific?
It's design standards on
Okay.
new overnight accommodations, so forms, functions,
Is design one of them?
sustainabilities. Yeah, design is a
So-
big one.
Well, that's a big one, okay.
I mean, they stated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've read that, but I just want to hear it.
Height, bulk, and scale, density and size.
That's-
I think
that's-
that's number one.
That's part of the design, right?
Yeah, it is, but I think density and size is really,
Is
is an important thing.
density and size, okay.
That's
Then
something that
aesthetics
we
and
need
look.
to.
Yeah, I've read that, but
That's
in
the
size.
things I think we can do, I can draft here.
Is that like one of the biggest ones?
Yeah,
Okay, that's the big one, okay.
but it's kind of a package. Landscape
we
Is-
have
is-
wide enough paths for.
We have the transportation.
Transportation would be one of them? Okay.
And then mixed use.
Sweet.
So maybe, under the water section, we add a couple more things for in the RC zone, like more water efficient toilets, and is gray water, landscape watering on here somewhere?
Yeah, that was in there somewhere, I forget last time.
It's not under water, it's somewhere else.
But, excuse me, but as far as.
Just for
talking
these
about
large
some
projects.
Usage of water inside the motel,
Yeah,
that's already addressed. We can't,
To a point.
yeah, I don't think we can do any more about that.
But what can
We
for-
can,
If we-
if we want to.
can we?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there are.
more water efficient shower heads.
There are state requirements that require low-flow toilets and shower heads and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But there are certainly things that they can do above and beyond that.
Yes.
To be even more water.
Local municipalities can regulate beyond what.
Can they?
So
Yes.
toilets and shower heads are already addressed in state code for large projects or any commercial projects.
Anything period, even in your house,
Okay,
yeah.
They've got residential, then small commercial, large commercial, schools, government buildings, malls.
so that's already in
I was
existence.
just
No, but-
looking at our matrix.
But I just don't know if we're gonna waste our time on something that is really, can really get someplace, like a shower head.
Like, there are entire cities in the world out there that require net zero building.
You need to talk into your mic, I'm sorry, Mary Ann, but it's
I
important.
think we need to start looking at net zero standards requiring net zero building.
And that's,
She has that on the front page.
Yeah, it's on
You
there.
got that on there. What does that mean exactly?
it means that a project generates as much power as it uses.
You have to produce as much as you use? Okay.
It's not that hard to do with what we have today, or at least to approach close. It depends on the building size. My question is, I would like, and this is something that there's much more informed folks thinking about, like going back to breaking up buildings, like if you have a large lot size, having multiple smaller buildings rather than one. Environmentally, it's interesting because I feel like sometimes there's a bit of a conflict between what is environmentally makes the most sense and what aesthetically looks the best. And I feel like that might be one of them, where it is both less expensive and less of an ecological impact if you have one building versus many smaller ones. So, yeah.
Energy-wise, too.
Yeah, which is why I almost like the idea of really having those facade requirements rather than separate
Smaller.
buildings, because again, it just gets back to that, like, yeah, it's nice, but I wanna just try to, as much as I personally can, steer us away from anything that's even has a whiff of being arbitrary in any way. And I feel like that one, unless we hear from everybody in the community that like they hate a large building no matter how it looks, then I think there's ways to mimic that feel of having multiple smaller buildings without having to require this hookup, that hookup, this driveway, that driveway, this whatever.
I agree.
And then we need to look at usable open space like Nora has in the matrix and decide if things like social open space, like restaurants, retail, just places where people can convene will define usable open space.
Yeah. And we talked about that last meeting, about how it's like, no, are we really truly gonna get just outside members of the community coming to hang out where everyone from the hotel is having their smoke break?
Right. I think for the smaller projects that are in town,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah,
For up in the north end, probably not,
yeah,
unless there's something really spectacular, which
Totally.
there might be.
totally.
I mean, if somebody wants to
Yeah.
do like a.
Frisbee golf.
To me, with some ideas for like this kind of a covered marketplace area where you have like different sort of food things and there are some places that are doing, hotels that are doing that, they're doing overnight accommodation and then this sort of urban market
Yeah,
thing.
that's cool.
So something like that could draw people.
I would say, I think open space requirements should just inherently be less when we're talking about that zone north of town. It should be more used space rather than open space. It's less geared towards the center of the community, but that could be a really great spot to have restaurants and offices and
The center
what have
community
you.
or
The up north. or
North of
the-
town?
RC.
Yeah, the RC.
Yeah, I see a benefit of it being like pristine open space, like native grasses and a walking trail and stuff like that. Then there's an ecological benefit to the river corridor. And so that's a consideration. Otherwise, yeah, just paving it or doing turf and a place to let your dog out and smoke cigarettes is really not a priority of mine.
Yeah, I'd hate to see, because I do feel like there are some times when our open space requirements have been a barrier to something that has been a really good project that we've wanted for the community, but because we have this, and then we just end up getting just like grass, which is not great. You know, you have that giant grass area that's in between.
Yeah.
That's in King Creek.
Apartments.
And I know part of that, at least, is their open space requirements for that development.
So you say they're too high?
I think so, yeah, I do. I think we have limited space in the valley and we have to recognize that. And as nice as it is to have open space, it's actually more environmentally friendly to have less.
I
We've tried
strongly
in the past,
agree with that.
We've tried in the past that development on King Creek to actually have it developed. At least at this point, the neighbors that are surrounding that actual piece of property don't want anything to do with that.
Well, that's fine. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about that property.
I'm just saying,
talking about-
for that to actually happen, we'll have a little bit of pushback on that.
I would rather see more buildings on a lot or more structure on a lot in the RC zone north of town than to have some nice small creekside parcel in town developed because we need more room for
Exactly.
something at some point.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and
And
then,
the other problem though they have is that land they don't use is grass.
Yeah, it's,
And it's using how many thousands of gallons a week, to water it.
Grass is definitely,
Okay,
Yeah.
but,
no more grass.
and I want you to keep your thought, but transit, I think, is a number within the top three. I think transit is a huge thing. I think that what we should be requiring, or try to require of the new motels coming in, is that they add something to that to help promote that.
yeah, I think certain hotels of a certain size should have to provide a free shuttle.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, and we have that in here,
But
like,
it's gonna require a few things, though. I mean, their architects are gonna have to put in there something that's gonna have a bathroom, that's gonna be to accommodate those who come off the bus, or who are waiting for the bus, or benches that are gonna be sitting there and where the bus can park in the shade, or something like that,
yeah, we need to add that shade structures for transport
I
required.
think we're getting there. We, in this town, in Moab City, we are growing. And if you go to St. George, they're doing it. If you go to some of these other places, the buses are running.
St. George, that's a transit system?
I think so, yeah. There's buses going through St. George, isn't there?
I have no idea.
I don't
I'll
think
bet there
so.
are.
Well,
It's either in car or.
There
well,
should
there's
be.
like Zion, there's a national park.
But I've seen them. I think, doesn't Zion have it?
Well, Zion has a great bus system. Yeah.
I think a quicker solution would be to require them to have a shuttle
Yeah, I think that's it.
to get their
Okay.
guests
And that
to
was some-
downtown and drop them off
Or, as
somewhere.
Allison
For
has
now, maybe.
mentioned.
Yeah, just for now, so
now,
there's
maybe.
something happening.
Yep.
Yeah,
But then having a shuttle, it'd be very easy to say, of a certain size, you have to have a shuttle that you provide to town center and a shuttle stop with
Yeah.
a shade structure.
and multiple small hotels can go in on the same
And
shuttle.
as Allison, I think, has said, every single meeting, that needs to be for employees as much as it needs to be for guests. Because if you have employees living somewhere in town, not everyone should have to drive, particularly if you're working at a hotel in the fringes of town, biking or walking or what have you, can be
I can't
a bit
remember.
much in the heat of the day in the summer.
And could we require a certain size of vehicle? I mean, if you just say you have to provide a shuttle, well, maybe they're gonna get to
Well, you
something
can
that's-
say it by you have the ability to transport X number of passengers
Right.
every 2 hours.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
however they want to do that, whether that's multiple 15
20
passenger
That's
vans.
what it said, like 20.
Yeah, but that could be like, if you say you need to be able to take 50 people every 2 hours, that could be multiple runs of like a 25-person shuttle or one big bus.
But yeah, I just want to get away from something that's going to help 5 people.
Is Worldmark the resort that's going in where the old gas plant was? So I can't remember the plans on that. Is the kind of road that goes in front of Archway and that other hotel, does that continue in front of that Worldmark place? Or do they have their own entrance from the highway? Because it'd be kind of nice to make that go.
Like a frontage road?
Yeah, frontage road, that's the word I was trying.
There is one that does for the 2 motels
Just for
you're talking
bikes
about.
to get into town and not be on the highway.
Yeah, let's
Okay,
do
so
that.
Or a tunnel under the new highway, but they probably
Well,
haven't
let me
designed
tell
that
you one thing
into
they are doing.
the,
The new
Bike
improvement
shortcut.
going north
Let's do that.
on the highway, you're familiar with that.
say that one more time, sorry.
The new improvement on the highway going north of town, going all the way to the
Yeah,
bridge.
the 4 lanes.
4 lane, okay, so what they're doing is where the restaurant, the old, what was that old restaurant called out there on the right side?
The Sundowner?
No, you know, the old house.
Oh, Grand Ole Ranch
Grand
House?
Ranch House, okay? So right there is where there's going to be,
A tunnel?
no, not a tunnel, it's just a turn to go down into that area there, or to go right. So that's gonna be one intersection, not with a light necessarily, but a major area to turn in and off. So that might be a frontage area.
I just am more so talking about this for bikes to get from the west side of the highway or people to
the east side
walk,
or the west?
either to the east side of the highway or to get to Fifth West. So they can get to the light and cross. It's really sketchy crossing the highway
I'll-
right
that's
there.
gonna have
There needs to be some way to cross or some connectivity in front of all these places into
It'll have to
town.
happen.
Yeah, I think the best for the economy would have just connectivity along the highway, because if we're encouraging all this retail and development, we want people to be walking past it.
Yeah, they don't wanna walk all the way down to Denny's to cross their highway.
But there's not even a way to walk to Denny's and cross the highway without being on the shoulder up the highway,
Yeah,
on
we
the
should-
west side.
I don't know
I know there
enough
is on the
about-
east side, but on the west side.
Connect all of it. I think all of it needs to be
I don't know enough
connected.
about what the plans are for the expansion of the highway north of town,
It's gonna be
or
sidewalk.
what we have that is
Is there
planned as
sidewalk? Did you
far-
just say there's sidewalk?
There will be sidewalk,
Oh,
On both sides and it's
Yes.
just
Oh.
like
need that.
yeah, and a
Well,
bike
then
lane.
that's perfect. Never
But I
mind.
do think Becky's point about a crossing somewhere for pedestrian traffic, because you have that whole northern corridor where right now, currently Denny's is the crossing
It seems
spot.
like with the way the grade is, it would be so easy to just
To do a
dig a
tunnel.
tunnel,
That
like
makes
there
so
is
much
up by
sense.
313.
Or like there is when you come off Porcupine Rim on
Right,
River
yeah.
Road.
Yeah.
Tunnels and bridges cost a lot of money.
Oh,
And
of course.
This is state.
And it's a state road,
Yeah.
So while we can contribute to that, they would have to build it, and it would have to be at a time when they realize there's a demand. Certainly, we can participate in that. And it's been done, for sure, other places. It's kind of hard to pin that on a single development.
For sure.
And probably the way to really generate funds for that is to have a transportation. Which makes sense, we don't right now, but we certainly could in the future. And then we need, with the regional transportation plan, we could identify all these projects and put costs associated with them. And then that justifies impact.
Yeah.
But trying to tie a crossing into a specific development is.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's but I do think if there's a way we could flag that as something when we're thinking about that portion of the highway, because right now, not having a crossing until Denny's for bikes coming off the River Road or off the bike path makes sense, because there's nothing they want to cross to. But if someone's riding the whole enchilada, they're coming back into town and their hotel is up past Archway, they're gonna want to cross there. So I think, if there's a way we can, I don't know who our sort of main liaison with UDOT is on that highway project, and I think Becky's dead on with the grade that it is, a culvert crossing makes a heck of a lot of sense.
I like knowing, though, that there's going to be sidewalk and a bike lane with the new
Yeah.
improvement, because I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
I
that'll
thought
happen.
it was just going to be a shoulder, because that's not fun to ride on the highway.
No.
Especially with the recent accident on even downtown where the speed limit's much slower, people get hit.
Yeah. All right. So let's look at some of the parcels on the north corridor. And some of this information is probably right
Great name.
Yeah, that makes me all warm and fuzzy
Yeah.
right there.
here. So Barron's, I don't know who that is.
Isn't that the one that's getting built on?
Is that my place?
I think that's the one that they came through and we approved already. I think.
So far 3 parcels on that side?
This is Lions Park.
Yeah.
And that's,
This must be
RV,
That's the RV.
RV.
right next to its vacant property.
And then there's the townhomes project that's going on the east side of the highway.
Then you have the 2 motels.
this looks really old.
Yeah, it probably is.
No, it's hard, the satellite, God, so much of the satellite imagery for town is, like, the whole Bonita subdivision isn't there on Google Earth, even the street.
Oh, yeah.
I can see if I can get that.
So do we, I guess,
There's really only like 4 parcels or 5 up there, I think that.
yeah,
Where am I?
I would bet you only have 7 or 8 property owners know that.
oh, yeah.
But some of these parcels are pretty big, like this one.
That's owned by the same person who owns the other 2 behind, on the
Which is the tram one, that's the one north of that?
Going north, going south.
Going north.
She's going south.
So the tram, that's the one right next to Lions.
It's up by the
It's
river.
at Lions Park, right?
Right by the river.
Oh, okay.
It's the one that's north of what you said was the
You're right
big one.
there. Okay.
It's the big square one up there.
This one?
No, in the RC.
That's the Salt Lake accommodation. That's JJ's property, isn't it?
Yeah,
That he just subdivided
but the
with
one north of that, just right above.
government
Yeah, right
lands.
That's JJ's.
This one?
County.
Is that right?
No,
Utah, it
that's
says
when that
Utah
guy bought
government
it.
Okay,
lands,
so
Grand
then the
County.
tramway one is the Salt Lake accommodations.
Yes.
That's what we just talked about with that
Yeah, we just.
subdivision, yeah.
So this must be the, yeah, here's the tram.
Yep.
So.
So that's JJ and his partner who now, yeah,
They're separate?
yeah.
They're separate
Yeah.
now? So this parcel, I don't know what it'll come in with, probably some additional retail and sort of, what the guy.
It was a bike shop, right?
Is an outfitter and,
A place to go sign up for activities, it kind of sounded like.
right, which is everywhere in town, but, and then the other part, obviously, I think,
But that's pretty deceiving because most of that's on the hill.
Yeah. The lower grayish part's probably
Yeah,
the
you
more.
might have 200 or 300 feet right there, and that's about it.
yeah.
That's
it's
parking
on
lot.
frontage.
And then that next funny little triangle, I think, is the project we just approved.
Okay,
Mhm.
that makes sense.
And then the old water park.
Is that this?
Yeah.
What's not in the city right now?
No, that's not.
Yeah, Palladium, that's her.
Was this vacant?
Where the arrow is, that's just all
Well, that's
grazing.
Gardner. No, that's not vacant.
That's all grazing. That 40-acre piece right there is all grazing. for
So is the old water park gonna be like a little walkable nature preserve or anything
Yeah,
like that?
she's not gonna develop that.
Or is
I
it-
don't think she'll turn it into anything. She usually
just be
doesn't.
She
Usually doesn't.
She
She
just-
pulls stuff down and then just leaves.
So it'll still be private property?
Yeah, it looks like she put it into a foundation.
And then that's JJ's property right there.
Yeah, that's a big one. So this is a good example. So this is, it has this on it.
Motel
So of course-
6.
Motel
Motel
6,
6
yeah.
there, yeah.
Motel 6. So in order to develop, they'll have to subdivide out the rest of the property. So, like on a parcel this large, would we let them come in with one big project, or would we want this to be more than one thing?
He's tried to do a couple things in the past, and they haven't gone through. So I have no idea what he's planning on doing.
I think he's kind of waiting on us at this point.
Yeah.
Is he?
I think apartments in that location, more than any other location, would be really, really great, but we can't put that on one single property owner.
No, certainly.
But he's got enough.
But it is within a different zone than the rest of the RC, which I think we should note. That is C4 rather than RC.
Be a great place for all of it.
Yeah, that would be such a
We should-
wonderful spot
Yeah,
for
we could
housing.
bend over
Yeah,
backwards to
they
make sure that
tried, they
happens.
tried to get a development in there.
Yeah, and our current
And
code
it
is not
didn't
very
work.
friendly for developments like that. And
You
I
could
think,
build an entire like small walkable community with trails and open space and everything there.
They were talking about that, and then there was a lot of pushback because of traffic on Fifth West.
yeah,
So, yeah, but I'm just giving you a historical,
Because people didn't want people driving on Fifth West?
yeah.
that's funny.
Man.
Yeah, I was in on that conversation. There are several things. He wanted to put a breakfast area next to Motel 6. The developer wanted a lot line adjustment, and he did the entire lot, they did the plat and everything, and then they said, well, we kind of messed up, can we have it anyway? And we said, no, you can't. You're gonna have to redo it all, because the lot lines weren't correct on that plat that he brought in, so that went south, and then JJ tried to bring in some affordable development into that area, and that did not fly either, so that's another, I don't
Is
know.
that near Motel 8 or 6?
6.
Oh, 6, I'm thinking Motel 8, I'm sorry.
This is 6, right?
Yeah, this is
Because
6.
Motel, I'm thinking Motel 8, I'm sorry.
Super 8.
Motel 8 still is an interesting piece of property. It has residential
Super 8,
area.
it's right to the left of your cursor across Main Street,
Right there.
right there.
Right there,
So Denny's on the corner and then the Super 8.
I'm sorry.
So
But
I
no,
guess the
but Motel,
question.
But you're right, though, because Motel 8 is sitting there. He's got that property behind it. Why aren't we bending over backwards to see that go into residential units?
Well,
Totally
I don't think bend over backwards is the right way to put it, because I do know people, people in the community listen to these meetings and you don't want to be. We're talking about incentivizing things that we want, though. So I think my next question, where I'd like the discussion to go, would to be, if we're looking at the big fields to the north of the Motel 6, JJ's property, because it seems like all of us really think that that would be a really wonderful place to have higher density, more affordable just by nature of what it would be housing. How do we get that on that parcel with our new code changes that we're proposing? Yeah,
Because C4 is not the appropriate zone for.
yeah. Or allow, if you have a C4 parcel that's adjacent to an R zone and you split it, if there's some sort of incentive for that, because they're gonna be subdividing that property anyways, and it's, it's Westwood Avenue, that's on, just the other side of what's now an easement, I think.
No, that's private property.
Oh, so
Don't they have some sort of,
you're-
there's something going across the Shumway property now where,
They're trying to
Lots,
get an
they're
easement from
trying
UDOT for drainage,
Yeah.
yeah.
but it's not the whole piece.
Yeah.
So your open space of a hotel could be subdivided and sold for low-income housing. Is that something we could do?
I wouldn't be for that.
Requirement?
No, I don't think so. You can't, I think.
So so you have a percentage that has to be open space unless you parcel off the same percentage or more for affordable housing.
That's what I would.
Or something like that, those kind of incentives. I guess I'm
Exactly.
just, because you were saying, which makes sense, the underlying zone as it's written now doesn't make a lot of sense, yeah. But also, where could you build an apartment complex in town currently? It's really only one of the C zones, or R 3 or 4? 4, really?
R3 is probably the zoning where that makes the most
The best
sense.
density.
C1
Yeah,
is also, that's designated to allow
yeah,
apartment types of uses. But we could change the C4 to say, for it to be harder to get an overnight accommodation approved unless there's
yeah.
an employee
I
housing.
think so, particularly because you are talking about, it's not the RC, it's stuff that's closer to the center of town by nature of what it is. We're talking about the south zone and this little split parcel, this portion on the north zone, I think. I mean, that's something I've wanted all along, is looking at these parcels and saying, okay, clearly, people in the community are gonna kvetch if you tried about high-density housing in existing residential areas. So why don't we make it so there's a higher incentive to have it in commercial zones? When our commercial zones, it's not like they're out in, you know, the middle of nowhere. I mean, this is C4 and it's 200 feet one direction from residential houses.
But I would like to recommend something. Rather than downplay the zoning, why don't we just add it into the higher zoning?
That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah,
So he has the option.
yes. And then we add incentives. Yeah.
That's what we were talking about before.
We just change it so that housing is allowed, which we've been talking about, where you can have ground floor housing in those zones where it's currently not allowed.
Yeah.
And then also incentivize, if you have a parcel that's over X square feet or X many acres, if you either subdivide it or within that existing zone on the same lot, have a percentage of housing.
Like we were talking about for the RC zone?
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't we just make it all one zone?
Well, that's an option.
Clean it up,
Yeah.
because it's a big parcel would be perfect for that. And some of those other ones too, even further south.
Like we do need all of the mixed use stuff, but for those places particularly closer to town, if there's any way we can incentivize housing with design standards or with density or with anything, let's do it.
And on what she's saying, you could also maybe, if this would be easier to say, well, a percentage of the property, if it's over 2 acres, would be dedicated.
To what?
Maybe, like say if you had 10 acres,
To housing?
yeah, to residential, you could say, well, 2 acres, that maybe would be dedicated to, would that be 20%?
Housing, dedicated to 20%?
Dedicated to some type of housing.
Or just long-term,
That's already an option under our shared workforce housing.
Yeah.
which applies to that kind of development, so we're
Yeah.
reiterating the same.
But we could strengthen it, I suppose. It's a ton of money.
Yeah, I know.
And people, it's a lot of money, and I understand that building housing is a lot of money, but people are starting to look at alternatives like actually building or buying units and deed restricting them so they remain affordable, which is good.
Which I think density is important for that, giving them enough density, height, letting people go up 3 stories if they're gonna do apartments, so that,
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, in Junction the other week, it's like, you see 4-story apartment buildings with nice facade breaks, and it looks fine. It's not like it's a skyscraper. It's a
Yeah.
typical apartment.
Yeah, I think we have to be more open-minded about that.
I mean, at least 3 stories we should leave.
Yeah, I think
for-
taking what we have in our, because we wrote our workforce housing ordinances before we were really doing this broad evaluation of overnight accommodations, period. So I think we're inherently going to overlap a lot. And anything that we can borrow, whether that's saying, see this chapter of the code and you get more density if you pick B or C as your workforce housing option, rather than A, which is the fee in lieu, which is almost everything that people have been picking. We could certainly tie it into that. It doesn't have to be its own brand new thing. It could just be, and you get to have more rooms or a higher building height or whatever if you
I think that's a good idea.
if you meet requirement 2 or 3 rather than 1. Like if you pick those options and then in the workforce housing stuff that they have to comply with anyways. I'm all about not reinventing the wheel.
We can relook at setbacks and height restrictions for every single zone that we look at.
Yeah.
Or for every lot that we look at, actually.
That is one thing I really want. I would really hate for us to come up with some good stuff and to get it in front of city council and for them to be like, no, we're not going over 4 stories or 3 stories, period. Because that's going to tank a lot of what we've talked about. So I want to be very clear that we are allowed to go a certain height in our proposed ordinances.
And I think if
Well,
we
gosh.
have design standards, they'll be more happy about those.
Yeah, I hope so. I would hope
But
so.
we did talk about that, and location was one of them.
Yeah.
So certain locations may be able to go up 4 stories and may not be near as intrusive as the 2 stories someplace
For
else.
sure. I
Yeah,
just
do we
wanna
need to
be
break-
crystal clear that we're not gonna come up with all these great things and then to have 3 people show up at a meeting and say that's too high and then to change their minds.
Do you think we
I'm
should
being,
break
like,
the
super frank
RC?
about that, but
No,
that's happened.
Right, and we definitely don't want.
Nora, do you think, sorry.
I'm sorry, no, you were talking.
Do you think we should break our C zone in half based on where the highway is? 2 stories on one side and 3 to 4, like 3 stories on the west side and then 4 stories maybe if you get so many 100 feet away from the highway where it's even further down? Like in the back of the development where the housing could be?
The east side of the highway to C4.
The east side of the highway, C4,
By the cliffs?
and then the west side keep an RC. So
And
we
have
keep
that
it
be our
bigger.
bigger, higher, denser.
Yeah.
Because I mean, character-wise, it seems, that just being the idea of zoning, I guess. The character of that east side should fit a little more with whatever goes in next to the Motel 6 or.
West side?
I love that we're talking about all these design standards, and we're looking at all this stuff with SAR, and we're looking at C4 and C2. It's great. We've got how many things here? 8 things on here? Let's go down to 3 things. 3 things that we want to move forward on by the end of the year. I hate to say this, you guys, but I've been dealing with the same stuff for the last 16 years. It has not changed. Nothing has changed. There's no housing. We've got huge developments going in. We've got the exact, I'm serious, you guys, this is one of the reasons why I have to get off this planning and zoning thing.
In the interest
It's
of not,
because
Jeanette, we've heard you say this before.
I know.
Just to keep the meeting on track.
We're taking it.
I think
Let's
we
talk
should.
I'm just saying.
Okay, so go ahead.
No, we have the list here from Nora of what we're looking at, and we're talking through it, we're bouncing around a little bit, but I think that's fine. And these are the things that we were instructed by city council to look at.
Yeah.
So I think arbitrarily whittling it down to 3 just because 3 sounds better than 5.
But I've got 4. How many have you got?
What's here on the list? Density and size, aesthetics, landscaping and buffering, mixed-use requirements, water, and contribution to traffic.
Okay. But
Transportation.
Okay, but design can catch the density and the size, can't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep that as 1.
yes.
Let's go to landscaping. And landscaping can include water conservation,
Right.
okay? And transportation, that's all by itself. I think that there's some things that we can require in these buildings that's gonna help us with the transportation.
What are you saying we only have
Come up with
5?
great ideas, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
On here?
Okay. Mixed use, that I think, to me, is the most broad thing that we have to address.
Yeah.
And in mixed use, what we'll want to look at is what kinds of uses we think are most appropriate for each zone. So we don't have, you
Yeah.
know, and they may be very similar, but there may be some differences about what kinds of commercial uses we want to encourage in more of our core area.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is it sounds like existing RC right now, a lot of the discussion has been around mixed use and density and height, where certain side of the highway, one height which is higher makes more sense if you're on the west side because it's lower, it's a different grade, whereas the east side of the highway have a shorter height restriction just because of how it looks aesthetically and then to fit with the character of the cliffs. But also understanding that that north part of town in the RC zone isn't probably the best place to require all the housing incentivizing. It maybe is the better place to require more mixed-use development. That seems to be something we've said at a lot of these meetings. So maybe the RC, that's where we have a lot of our mixed-use focus, and incentives based on more mixed use. Whereas in the C4 or C2, 3, those other areas where you can currently have overnight, where you could have had overnight accommodations, housing makes more sense to have that be the other balance of the land use. Right? Does that kind of capture what we've said?
It does, we were gonna bring it up.
But I also think that in town, some of the C2 and C3 properties, it would be nice to be able to allow overnight accommodations if we were getting something like daycare.
For sure.
Or something that, really is community-wide
Yeah.
benefit.
that's needed.
I just don't see those two things going together at all. I mean, I would not want to drop my kid off at a place where there's different people coming in and out all the time. I don't want to live in a neighborhood where there's coming and going every weekend. I think those are more appropriate in the community nodes that we're going to focus on next, like on Fourth East. I don't know. I wouldn't take my kid there.
But
Well, if you have 2 condos above, that's not even.
You just never know who's going to be there, you know? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm
I think
weird.
that's
But
valid, yeah.
But we can gather impact fees and put towards the community nodes for more daycare and community benefit.
I like that idea of it being more fees-based for smaller developments.
More what based?
Fees-based for smaller developments.
Which we already have, I guess, with the
Which
housing
we have,
thing.
but yeah, maybe target where that money is
mean,
going differently if we
like,
can.
The ideal would be if we did a large master planned affordable housing area, we would have a daycare facility on that huge parcel, like in the master plan development.
Are you guys talking about like a city-run daycare or like a place for someone to open a business?
So like,
Talking about private, right?
talking about that parcel again, the big horse field, Motel 6, JJ's property, if we had overnight accommodations on part, hotel or condos or whatever it might be, and then an apartment complex or a series of fourplexes or what have you, and then to have that have some sort of retail, some sort of support service, commercial thing.
Zone specifically.
It's just hard because we don't, I guess that seems, Nora's question is, do we want that to be zone specific then still? Are the zones as we have them drawn, do they make sense?
You're just gonna allow it in the zoning. I mean, if the idea is accepted, you're gonna bring it up to the zone and say it's acceptable in that zoning. But the supply and demand is something we can't determine.
Oh, I understand that.
So why don't we just add it into the zoning and say, there it is, if you want to do that here, if you want to put a restaurant there, if you want to put housing in the back, you can do that there.
Right, I think that's the intent.
Yeah.
What if in the RC zone on the west side of the highway, if they did long-term housing, they could have 4 stories instead of 3? As long as it's so many feet away from the highway.
Put it in there.
So should we want long-term housing or should it be other commercial in the RC zone?
Just in conjunction with, like, maybe the front part, so many 100 feet has to be commercial, and then if they do choose to do apartments like on the back side of the development, they can go up 4 stories.
Exactly.
But only if it's long-term housing and maybe X amounts, long-term residents and X% of median income.
I mean,
This seems like a good place to get some height
Yeah.
and,
In the RC?
yeah, and C4, like JJ's piece, if that was gonna change to RC, it's a great spot.
Yeah.
and it's a good place to add in the don'ts, the things we don't want to see.
Okay, like,
Like, we don't want to see abuse of water, for an example. We don't want to see maybe a certain type of building to go in. I mean, we can put our don'ts in there and leave it at that.
well, and, I think that's what we want to do, is we want to develop standards so that people can know what they can and can't do. And
Yeah.
what standards will have to be followed.
But there's so many architectural designs
Oh, I know, I
that
understand
we can't
don't
even
wanna-
scratch the surface with it. That's the reason why the don'ts might be easier than the do's.
Would you have to have a different zone on the east side of the highway for different height restrictions on that side, or do you just reference it within the same zoning
Either way,
code?
you could do it either way.
Seems like it'd be easier just to have it all like one zone and say on the east side of highway from X to X, 2 stories maximum.
So you're saying, you're saying maybe 2 stories maximum on the east side?
Yeah, where you're building up onto the hills. Isn't that kind of what?
I'm saying that if we're talking about views, trying to keep views, if and
Well, just so you don't feel like you're driving into the valley and it's like towers.
when you drive from the bridge coming towards town, and you see the new development, and it's called
Is that one 3
the
stories?
the World Mark,
I'm sorry?
the World Mark. Okay, so
No, not
you've
that
come to see that view, to see if you can still see the portal, haven't you? I mean, everybody's doing that. I can still see the portal. That's important.
I mean on the,
Yeah, we should define our view sheds and then say that we're protecting
We
view
are trying to
sheds.
protect
Right, and
that.
there's some language in there about making sure that you can maintain the view and then all that.
The piece between the old water park and JJ's property on the east side of the highway, is that a 3-story hotel that we approved or 2?
It's three.
It's three.
It's 3, yeah, that was gonna be my
And
next
it's
question.
29,000 square feet, so it just missed being required to go through the over 30.
In just the one building, right?
Coincidence, I'm sure.
And just, what's that called, My Place? No.
My
Yeah,
place.
Moab, my place, 64 rooms,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, I thought they did a great job. No, are you talking about the ones that has the buildings up behind it as well? That's not the high.
No, east side of the highway.
East side of the highway, it's
On the
just
hill.
a big box.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, which is, I guess, that just comes back to this is where it seems like an example of where the code's failing us now. So
Yes,
how do we shore that up?
Yeah, so let's
Going,
change that on that side.
so I guess just looking back at your list and trying to keep us a little on track, I don't think, unless it's tied to water, that metering new projects makes sense.
I agree.
Yeah.
Or Mary Ann, do you guys, I mean, it seemed like you were on board with the water. We just have to have that in, so one of Nora's sort of discussion questions was, should we allow a maximum number of rooms or projects per year? So metering that way.
And if you tie it to water, then, you know, you have there's a defensible tie there.
Yeah,
But you can also, you know, if you want kind of the rate of change to slow, in other words, not quite as much construction per year, that would be a different approach. And ultimately, that would certainly be a city council approach, but, you know, they probably would want to hear from you. I know some of the county planning commissioners feel pretty strongly about that. And they've done that in their high-density overlay zone. There's a maximum number of units that they will approve per year.
Because though, why?
Because they don't want too many per year, just
Yeah.
because
I know, but why?
they've changed.
But what, why?
I think with us needing more budget money for infrastructure, if somebody wants to build on their property and we need budget money, let them build. And as long as there's not a water constraint, you know, why not? Why, just because we don't like change, that,
Jeanette, you were saying that your irrigation, what were you saying about that? It goes down on the weekends? Is that, I don't know how that.
are you talking about Moab irrigation shares?
I do not,
Well,
Moab irrigation shares?
I do not.
so
I do.
who would be taking that water that you were mentioning?
There's somebody up above me on Mill Creek that obviously has a pump somewhere that is taking more water than their share.
But Jeanette, did you say you don't have any shares?
I do not have shares.
Okay.
Where's
so-
your water from?
I do have, but I have water rights on Mill Creek.
Yeah.
But I'm not part of
So she's
Moab
not taking any
irrigation.
water, you don't have.
So
any,
somebody's stealing your
Moab
water.
irrigation water, she doesn't have, and so they have the right to take all of that Mill Creek, basically.
If they have the water rights.
Yeah, rights aside, I'm
But
just
if they
curious
don't, they
what
pump
you were
it, like she's
observing.
saying. They pump that and they supply that water, and it's an agreement with the Spanish Valley water system. They have to supply that water, but that's not part of this. It's not, like.
That's
I'm saying-
mismanagement of the
I'm just
water.
saying,
Yeah.
if, from a present point of view, I mean, I think the water issue is, I think it's a brilliant way to control development responsibly
Yeah.
and also be defensible. And that's huge, because a lot of these people are like, well, I'm gonna sue you.
Well, sure.
And you're gonna say,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So for me, and at this meeting, I think the biggest takeaway from this meeting for me is that I think the water angle is probably the best angle to start with,
Yeah.
and then go from there. I think that's huge. It's a huge,
It could be, and especially if it was a real issue. And
So
I
I
guess Nora's gonna find out if it's a real issue.
So, yeah, we should look into that.
It definitely will be.
It is
Yeah.
a real issue.
Down the
We-
road,
we've said
but
that,
right
and
now, I
We need
don't
to address that
think.
responsibly. That's why we're saying we don't want to have any landscaping that's gonna take too much water, because that's our wonderful source of drinking.
Yeah, I think we can be way more strict with the landscaping water.
Yeah, I would just,
I mean, like, you can use it for the first 2
I
years
think
to
we should-
establish a plant, and after that, you're
Yeah.
down to like gray
I
water
agree.
only.
And I'm with you, and I think that we should be retroactive about it as well, with the motels that are in. I think we
Yeah,
should be
change
addressing
that, so,
that.
yeah.
we could
Like a-
start like
That-
our dark skies code where
Yeah.
it says you have this long to implement,
Yeah.
and here's the new.
I-
We don't wanna do that. Because I haven't figured out how I'm gonna do it for lighting yet, much less landscape.
Well, maybe
It
that's
is-
another
it
thing
is-
we work
it
on
is-
after this.
It is
Yeah.
the most abusive thing that you can have that's the cheapest,
I understand,
okay?
and I
And
think,
we pay for it.
Yeah,
I know we do, I understand.
So do we want to go down like your chart and start marking X's where we want things applied? Is that what you want us to do, or?
You can.
Okay.
You can do that.
I guess my bigger question is, do we want to do it all by the zones that we have right now, or does it make sense, like we were talking about, to maybe put different things with other, you know, if like JJ's property makes more sense to be with the zone that's north of it, or if it makes more sense that it is something different?
Yeah. That definitely needs to be addressed, because I feel that way about C2 and C3 downtown. Like, you can't require commercial on every C2, C3 piece. You almost need to designate like Main Street, like certain areas where commercial is viable, because like Center Street is a dead-end street. There's dead-end streets all over with C2, C3, where if you make someone build a commercial building space, they might have a really hard time renting it out or even getting anything done with it, you know?
But let the zone carry that. Say you want to go to C2 and you have a dead-end zone or a dead-end street, then you can't, make it super simple. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously.
Well, that's
make
what I'm
it
saying.
super-
If you require commercial on the ground floor on every C2, C3, then
That doesn't fit.
it doesn't fit. So
doesn't-
you can't really blanket it. Just like
Can't,
RC and C4, we kind of need to maybe break it up more than what zoning we just had. I don't know.
But let
We're
the
probably making this so
development
complicated.
itself figure out how you want to change that zone. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
Do you,
And I think, long-term, it's certainly, I mean, right now, what we're trying to do is come up with development standards for overnight accommodations in different zones.
Yeah.
And we don't even have to allow it in all the zones at once. We can concentrate on the RC and the C2, or whatever, and draft those standards. And then, like JJ is in an R4, but if he wants to rezone to RC,
Or C4, you mean?
yeah, C4, but if he wants to rezone to RC, then maybe that's an option for him. Or maybe
Yeah.
down the road, we look at making some of the,
Okay, so can we maybe stop thinking about the individual and think about more the abstract a little
Yeah,
right
big
now?
picture.
yes, but we also, I mean, it drives, like some of these big parcels will drive, I mean, some of our decision-making will need to envision how
Yeah.
those big parcels might
Yeah.
develop.
I guess that's why I use that example, because I personally would be distraught if we opened this back up and that particular parcel, for whatever reason, just became something that didn't have an apartment complex, if that was the desire of the property owner, which it sounds like based on his proposals in the past, it's been. Like, that would, I guess that for me is what I don't want to happen, is for those opportunities to be missed just because we open the door again, and then knowing the door is open, everyone comes in with their proposals for something that fits with what we've done, just so they can get it, worried that we're gonna do something again.
Well, we already have the assured housing ordinance too. So something, whether it's a fee or housing, is gonna get built. If you can add some density and height,
Yeah.
they'll probably be more likely to want to build it on their property.
Yeah, so how about, and this would actually fit regardless of what the zone is, if we did have that tie to our assured workforce housing ordinance, saying if you choose option 2 or 3, you can build this much more dense or this much higher in the RC or C4 zone. Knowing that likely, because of the unavailability of land for those RC parcels where there's a big hotel going in, it would make a heck of a lot of sense if they just put some housing on the back of that property.
Yeah.
I agree.
And it's the best place for it, like, you're not gonna want
And
something
it's
like that
easy,
downtown, because
it's
it'd be
written
so
in.
tall compared to everything else.
It's already got it already has the affordability features in it too, the workforce housing ordinance. So we wouldn't have to rewrite all of that.
Yeah,
We should be helping our community
Yeah.
more with all of what we're doing.
And then on top of that, we still have mixed-use requirements on parcels over a certain size.
So right now, the way the shared housing thing works is, you basically have three options. You can do fee and lieu, you can build units, well, four options. You can build units either on your site or off your site.
Yep.
Or you can take existing units and purchase them and de-restrict them. So we could say, if you put them on your site, then you can get some additional
Yeah.
density, I think that's great.
Absolutely.
or height or something.
Yeah.
Something, where do we think,
Bonus height above and beyond what it,
And
Yeah.
if they build 50% more of that
Right.
and put it into some kind of they own it and they get the benefit of all the rental,
Right.
that we do something for them, not bend over backwards.
well, I think we are,
But
with
something.
density and height or whatever, I guess.
There are,
Should look and see, I guess I don't know from a developer's perspective, what are the most sort of onerous things on this list that we've talked about, which would be more of that kind of incentive, whether it's
They-
effort or money?
They still win. You know what I mean? They can still win. The people who own the motel are still in the motel business, basically.
well, they're not stopping just because they have to pay for shared housing.
No.
Right, so say, keep your money,
They're arguing about it.
build more of what we need, and you get to, not only do you get your rental from your overnights, but you get it from the monthly as well.
Right. And maybe also, if they dedicate land for affordable housing.
That would be great.
Um,
Like JJ's parcel would be perfect for that. Say, yes, and you are also allowed to, for your workforce housing, dedicate land. You are allowed to come in with a subdivision proposal that would dedicate land, that would make this corner of your C4 R3.
or even that land, like all the RC, the land north of the archway, or even some of the land in C4, Moab Solution, Business Solutions, that big piece under
Yeah.
that could maybe be, it's pretty big, I mean.
Yeah. I'd like to see
That's
that
why I think
happen
we
too.
just take the whole thing and make it
We
one.
talked about it in the past and we decided that we would have to be able to find like 3 different appraisal values and just have a standard for how we were appraising that, the worth of the land that they dedicate.
Yeah, how do we do that now with the,
I don't
has
know
it
if
happened
it's
yet?
spelled out in our shared house.
I don't think the dedication of land is, we talked about how we would fairly do that, and so we would still have to,
It'd be on a case.
we would,
Oh, for
we
the
would just,
city to develop.
Or
Is that what you're
something.
saying?
Or
Yeah.
for
Oh.
something, for them to be like, and this is the next Hasu development or something, right? I mean, I think that, and the reason we have that in the workforce housing ordinance is because there are a lot of people in town who own many different parcels in town, and that was sort of that allowance to say, yeah, maybe this isn't the best place for it here, but like one of the other 7 developable parcels you have in town might be a great spot for you to say, okay, I could build 7 hotels, but now I'm gonna build 3 hotels and 4 apartment complexes or whatever. I like that, especially because we really aren't getting people biting on those options. And if there's a way that we could really be like, look, yeah, it is cleanest, it is easiest for you to choose these. Because that's why people choose fee and lieu, because it's cleanest and it's easiest, right?
Right, but.
Or their parcel's not big enough for
Yeah.
apartments.
I mean, the hoodoo is kind of a good example of sort of a mix, right? It's got a hotel that's pretty good size, and then it's got 2 affordable housing on site, which I think is the preferred model.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
It's all right,
There's no
yeah.
question about that.
And they didn't have to do that under the,
They didn't.
they were predating the workforce.
I think they're seeing down the road. Could we do C3? You know how we want the businesses underneath the C3? If you have a 3-level or whatever for apartments, and the bottom floor has to be commercial, I think should be taken out.
You think what?
I think that should be taken out.
I think we should
Really?
redefine
I think it should
C3 if you
stay.
think that. I think if
That
that's,
doesn't encourage anybody to want to build that.
In C3,
Yeah.
it's Main Street.
Well, I understand that. So I'm actually thinking of a specific piece of ground, okay? It's within a residential area, south end of town. I've met with that person about building those, and it's requiring that bottom floor to be commercial.
South
yeah,
of
they could
town.
always just say we want to rezone, and if it's reasonable, then we
I'm
would
just saying,
address it.
I don't know why we have that in there. It doesn't make any
It's a
sense to me.
commercial zone, it's not a residential zone.
Well, why haven't they come in and asked for a rezone yet?
So if you have a commercial zone, but you say you want residential uses, then it should
Well,
be residential.
I'm telling you what it's zoned.
Right.
It's a residential area, but it kind of meets up to commercial as well. But to me, it doesn't make any sense that we would have that in there because.
So they want to do
I
all
would-
residential? Then they should just
residential.
rezone
They
it.
wanted to have it all residential.
That would be so simple.
Yeah, that'd be my inclination.
But the problem with that is
The
that
property
then,
owner
then
has to request it.
it's gonna change his density.
Oh,
So it's
He
like,
doesn't have to follow, I mean, he doesn't have to go for the highest density he could possibly do. What is the lowest density
we
he
want
could go?
housing and here we are, we can't even agree on getting
But
that done.
Well, just
anything is
go in
better
and,
than
go in
nothing.
and request a rezone and
I would say that.
propose a plan.
Yeah.
But I think.
The property owner has to do
One
that.
of the things that we heard during the public comment was that all of our commercial zoning was getting eaten up by hotels because it was the highest and best use. They were gonna make the most money, so everybody's doing it at the expense of the commercial that we need, the diversification in commercial uses that we need. That was one of the premises of this whole effort. So to say, to back off and say, well, you can do, in the C3 zone, you can do all, well, it wouldn't be in rental necessarily. Maybe if they do, I mean, there may be some provisions, anyway, I think it's important that we also not forget that we need a variety of commercial uses as well.
Yeah.
Just
Here's
Yeah.
an idea.
True, I understand that.
So in C3, pre-moratorium and our existing accommodations map and everything right now, if you had a 3-story building in the C3, you couldn't have long-term residential on the ground floor, but could you have short-term residential on the ground floor?
mhm.
I don't know.
In the C3, I'm not.
Yeah, you can.
You can?
Okay. Because like
No, you
that
can in the
seems
C-
like
I know you can in the
that
C-
seems like the compromise, right? Where, yeah, you don't have to have a shop, but you can have.
This is where I think, like, if it's not on Main Street or like First West, like we pick some key areas where we want that to be commercial, then you could do residential downstairs.
That makes sense.
But you're not required to do commercial necessarily. It could be more of a mix between nightly rentals and long-term housing, because that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
But to say everyone in C2, C3 has to do commercial on the first floor, and it's dead-end streets where nobody's walking down there or driving past it ever unless they live there, it's not really fair to make someone build commercial space.
Well said, I agree with that.
And we still want them, I guess maybe the reason for not rezoning would be the resale value on the property, potentially.
Yeah, density is huge.
Density and, once you're not C anymore, the idea of upzoning from R back to C at some point is
You really want a
you're
downside?
pretty, yeah, exactly, you're pretty dead in the water, exactly.
Yeah, because then C3, you can go 3 stories,
Yeah.
but if you could do it all residential, that makes way more sense renting it long-term, bottom line-wise, than going down to R2 where you're 2-story and how many units per acre, like 10? I think we should make like I don't know if I'm just making up new silly ideas, but like within a certain zone, can you define like an area, like a grid, like Main Street, First West, and I don't know, First East is mainly houses.
Anything within 200
But-
feet of Main Street?
This north vicinity to the south, like this area has to have commercial on the main floor of these zones. Anywhere else, like you can mix residential, whatever, within the, it'd be,
I was just saying, this sounds like an overlay.
Don't want
Yeah.
to do that.
Because that's exactly why.
Yeah,
well,
why you want
overlays
it,
work
yeah.
the best.
Yeah,
When you have a locational difference.
and smaller parameters.
because we need
Overlaying
shops,
everything.
we need restaurants, we need,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you grant it for.
In this
people,
area.
You don't have to ask for it for you.
I think that's a great idea. for the downtown core. If we're gonna have still don't like what they're doing at the county.
Well, I don't support first floor residential on Main Street.
No,
No.
Period. I mean,
it doesn't
I-
I'm okay with
mix
that. I'm
together.
just saying that off Main Street,
Yeah,
Yep,
even if
there
it's 200
there are
feet,
quite a few C3 parcels that,
if they don't have to meet that part of it.
yeah,
okay, that's a good idea.
just having that, the character of Main Street would then be captured regardless of what the underlying zone is. I think that's good too.
Yeah, I mean,
Because it does get a little, there's some things that are Main Streety that are,
Early on both ends.
yeah,
Certainly the core is pretty easy to,
yeah.
all right, these are all really good.
That makes people want to walk around and, you know, there's shops. They're not, if there's like a lawn chair and somebody's trash sitting on the sidewalk, they're not going to walk down there.
I guess-
You know, they want stores.
For the last little bit of the meeting, if there's a way we could sort of like get our discussion of housing provisions sort of done and dusted, and then move on to the next thing, next time we talk about it. Like, so we're saying the whole idea being that people do not want, well, the discussion being that it's the highest and best use in commercial zones, and that was kind of the main driving factor for this. But we talked a lot about housing tonight and incentivizing housing. Would the ways that we've talked about incentivizing housing, if those were in place, if we got that into some sort of code provision, would that check that box for us so we can then just focus on mixed use and how to incentivize that next time?
Sure.
Like, how do you guys feel about that? Like, is doing something or recommending that council makes more incentives for those other options in the assured workforce housing that the developers already have to meet if they're doing new overnight accommodations? Is that satisfying our duty to push more for more housing in the course of all of this? Because then we can not talk about it ever again, which would be nice. Well, we'll have ordinances and stuff, but,
I mean, what
yeah.
I can do is I'll go back with the ideas that I've heard from you, and actually,
done with like the brainstorming though.
yes,
on it.
and actually draft some language
Yeah.
for the RC
Yeah.
and or C4, that talks about incentives for employee housing or affordable housing or whatever we want to call it. Workforce housing, attainable housing.
Just any housing.
Right,
Rental.
rental housing. Doesn't have to be rental though, it could be ownership, or doesn't
Well,
have to be
I know,
rental.
but it just seems like.
I think
in these
ownership would be
areas-
good too.
But I can certainly go back and kind of take a first whack with the ordinance provisions based upon these discussions on the incentives for what you get if you provide more residential units on site.
Yes.
Yeah, I think with that, without opening up a whole new topic, we may want to consider different income levels and expand just the amount of money that people can make and live in the housing developments that we create, so that we include all residents.
So in our shared workforce housing, it has, if you do more, if the unit is more affordable, you need to do fewer of them. So if you're doing 100% AMI, for example, you have to do 20 times as many units as you do as a very, very low income.
But
So-
didn't we kind of have like a gap between the amount of money someone could make and a market level house? I thought that I remembered there being a gap there. So that like, if you made over like 60,000 or 70,000 for a family, you still wouldn't be able to get a house here because you needed to make up to like 200,000 or something to like afford a market rate house. So if we
So you're talking about the gap between median
that
income
income
and
gap?
upper income?
Yeah.
Well, only X% of the total project has to be income restricted, right? Isn't it like 70% or something? The whole,
That's the pad.
Yeah.
That's
Oh.
a different thing.
Yeah, I confess I don't know how the assured workforce housing ordinance left city council.
Okay, well, I can send it to you.
Yeah.
Basically, there's a table, and there's a multiplying factor, and there's a cost per square foot. So the way it works is the multiplying factor is based upon the level of affordability that you're achieving. And if you are providing more of those, you have to provide fewer. Or if you're providing units that are less affordable, then you have to provide more of them. And the cost per square foot of, in lieu of fee, also changes based upon,
Yeah.
you know, willing to provide. I can send a copy to you, it's online.
Yeah.
I need to read that, because I was thinking of
I
PAD.
remember it as we sent it along.
I've read PAD so many times and I still don't understand all of
And
it.
I think we need to relook at
Yeah.
that too long, but that'll be Caitlin's.
So Nora, in preparation for the city council meeting that we're gonna have join on the 22nd, are we gonna have another meeting now between now and then?
We
that's
do.
gonna
Yes,
be just addressing this?
definitely.
Yep.
And I'm gonna try to draft some stuff next week.
Okay.
Make this some real,
But like the idea being that we got, like, I think maybe those things will cover here's our housing incentives with our new overnight accommodations onto the next thing. Because I feel like, at least I'm trying to channel
And saving
Allison, which
space
is like, we've checked this, let us go.
Oh,
So,
well, and I think we're, saving space for other commercial businesses too. I think that's just as important in these
Yeah.
zones to me as housing, because
Exactly.
housing we can address in residential zones
For
more
sure.
than we can this.
yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. So now that can just be the focus.
Yeah.
We don't need to,
Work on
aside from
commercial.
looking at what you draft up and tweaking and stuff, that the focus is now on like, all right, how do we get the restaurants? How do we get the offices? How do we get, laundromats, whatever. Sweet.
I have enough ideas to keep me going.
That means we can go home?
I just need time,
Yeah.
and so now that I will have a little help, it will be.
Good.
This is our new planning commissioner, though.
Oh, welcome. Hello. Come on in.
Sorry, I had the time, I had 7 p.m. in my head for some reason, so I
Well,
apologize.
No problem.
I'll get up to speed.
Oh,
as
she
quick
thought
as
it was
I
at
can.
7.
I'm sorry, come on out.
Come sit.
I don't know when you stopped in, so.
Just a few minutes,
Okay.
like 10 the most.
Okay, so we made it kind of different times. I mean, usually we start at 6. That's kind of our standard. But if we have a work session, then we'll start at 5. And we have a couple people that have to get up in the morning and work, so, many. So we try to have them a little bit earlier so they don't go quite as late, so I apologize. I left your message. Did you just get it?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Jessica. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about why you're here and what you're thinking, and then I want to sit down with you before our next meeting.
Okay.
Maybe I can get Allison to our chair, who's not here tonight. But.
So yeah, for those that don't know me, I'm Jessica O'Leary. I first moved to Moab in '97, and then I left for graduate school and came back in 2011. So been back for a while. I've lived all over the West. I grew up mostly in Hawaii. And then I finished high school in Mill Valley. And every place I've ever lived in the West has gotten exorbitantly expensive, and everybody I went to school with can't afford to live there. And there's so much change coming all over the West, no matter where you live, that I just think change needs to happen with purpose and with the locals in mind. So I thought it was about time I saw Moab change in ways that hopefully will benefit all of us.
I think you're on the same page pretty much, so. Yeah, good, well, welcome. And what we'll get in touch, and then I can kind of go through the way things work and where you get your information, and we'll give you an email address and all those kinds of things.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Still by yourself there, Brian, sorry, man.
I'm the only one. You live over by my son, I think.
You live over on the east side, right?
I'm on Secret Cove.
Yeah, my son, Brian,
Yes,
Lives
we are
across.
neighbors.
your neighbors. I don't know which one you live in, but yeah, I know you're right there.
Yeah, we bought the house from the Neesons.
Oh, you did? That's right.
Oh, you live right next door.
Yeah.
I think your husband brought us a wine cork the other night.
Oh, yes,
Or a
he did.
corkscrew. My cousin didn't have one of those.
Yeah, we know we could get them for Christmas.
Yeah.
What's next on our agenda, other than more of this?
More of this, we have a number of site plans that will be coming forward relatively soon. We have Four Corners community, it's like a recreation and it's center, that will be coming forward. We're trying to figure out, there's some of their parking, what their parking requirements should be, so. we're
On
still
Knob
looking
Hill?
behind the scenes. I'm sorry?
The development on Knob Hill? Is that the Four Corners?
I don't know off the top of my head where it is. Then we have the Hoodoo Casitas will be going through. You'll be seeing probably at the next meeting, the Hoodoo, not at the next meeting, one after that, the Hoodoo Village, apartments 2 east, so the second apartment building related to the Hoodoo. There are a couple minor subdivisions that'll be ready for meeting after next.
Cool.
We keep getting new applications all the time.
Cool.
So we have, it's
Hey, Nora, one thing, Joe Kingsley, he was talking about a transportation system that was gonna be taking place someplace. They've been working on, is any heads up on that?
So UDOT has offered to help with some regional transportation planning. And what we're hoping, what the county and us are hoping is that we can leverage some of our own funds and what UDOT is willing to contribute and kind of do a regional transportation plan for this part of the county.
Now, is that a localized, or is that to and from Salt Lake? What are we talking about?
Local.
Just localized,
That's
okay,
local.
good,
That's one thing.
okay.
The second thing is there's a train initiative, which is what Joe's really interested. And again, this is UTA, or maybe it's UDOT, is looking very seriously and putting money toward a study to see the feasibility of passenger rail.
To Salt Lake?
Yes.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's in the beginning stages, but the studies are showing, the rail.
The line's
the
there.
rail's there, so, you
Yeah.
know, we need to be updated in some locations and such.
Sweet.
At least we haven't done it all.
Are they still looking into a bypass at all? The other day when we went to
It's
to
in
Main
UDOT's
Street
30-year
for the
plan.
parade, when they rerouted the traffic, it was so quiet on Main Street. I was like, this is so nice.
It just costs so much money.
Yeah.
And UDOT doesn't have that kind of money, we certainly don't have that kind of money, so it's on the list, you know?
It'd be
It's-
awesome.
I mean, in the long term, a lot of people favor that, but it's certainly not in our short-term capital.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't favor it too.
Yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages. I mean,
Yeah.
towns can drive in the line and say, no,
Yeah.
They can, and they do.
Well, packed.
Great,
It's up to her, it's just a workshop.
perfectly set.
Yeah. It's not really a destination, though. We're a destination, so I don't think it would be as bad, but it might affect.
You guys ready to
some
roll?
things.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Rambling.
Thanks for letting me be a tyrant tonight. I apologize I was trying to
No, that's fine. Good.
just be productive. Should we start at 5, our next meeting too? Is that something
You know
that-
what I would really like to do?
Yeah.
I'd like to do a field trip
Okay.
Yeah.
before. So
Where to?
maybe we meet at 5, and I'll see if I can get a van or something. We can drive the north corridor,
Sounds great. That's
and then
actually a
come
great
back
idea.
here by 6. And do it.
Cool.
Does that sound like a good idea?
Do we stop for ice cream or anything?
Yeah, really.
Maybe.
Brian and I will be in the back seat. Can we stop?
Yeah. Right there, right there.
My mom has a minivan I could probably borrow.
That's what?
A minivan. If you don't have a van.
We have access to a van.
Do we? Good.
Otherwise, we could take a couple cars that can get us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for letting me be efficiency witch was my